Adjusting the length of the leash on your poi with static rope is super important and can be pretty tricky. This rope is awesome. It's made out of a polyamide nylon and it's super durable, feels great. It's very firm and tightly packed with fibers. So when you go to cut it, it can fray and open up, and it's also kind of a perfect fit on the washers and the knob, and so getting it back on is really hard. So I'm going to show you a few tips for making this go smoothly. Now we send out by default, unless you've gotten your leash customized, the leash basically longer than anybody would actually want, because you can always make it shorter but you can't make it longer. So I personally would like my poi to come right to my shoulder. So I'm going to slide this knob up past where I want it to be, and then slide it down until it's right where I like my poi at. There we go. And so I know that's the length I want it to be. And now we also provide it with 3 washers by default to give the knob a little bit of weight. You might want less, and so you might want to remove some. You could fit some more in there. It would start to protrude out of the knob a little bit. So we don't really recommend more than 3. But so with that washer all the way down, that's going to tell me where I want to cut it and melt it. So I'm going to be leaving just like 1/8 of an inch of extra rope sticking out past the washer, which is going to get melted down into this little kind of puck at the end that prevents it from sliding through the washer, right? And so right about 1/8 of an inch from there, I'm going to put a little bit of tape to mark it. And then slide that back. And now I know I want to cut right at that line on the edge of the tape. I prevent it from fraying as I cut. And you can use pretty much any tape to do this, as long as you use enough of it that it doesn't tear. So now I'm going to tape, I'm actually going to tape right over that line, so I can still see the line. If I was using, that's not necessary. Let's not do that, because if you're using blue painter's tape or masking tape or something that's more opaque and maybe thick enough that you wouldn't really feel that line through it, you really want to know where that is. Another thing to consider is to kind of pull. You don't want to pucker the rope. You want to pull the rope so that it's nice and firm where you're cutting in. So I've got I know that this tape is pretty durable. I've got about 2 wraps on there. It wouldn't hurt to put more tape on it, because when you go to cut it, you're going to be kind of flattening the rope, and that can cause the tape to tear. So now I got the sharpest kitchen knife I could find and a cutting board, because this stuff is don't even bother trying with scissors. If you have the most amazing scissors in the world, maybe, but you're probably better off using a knife and basically cutting it like it's a sausage or something. So I'm just going to saw at it with the knife. Until I get all the way through. And that's a nice clean cut. Now, this is the time if you want to take off any of the washers. Now would be the time to slide them off over that tape. Once you remove the tape, you do not want to let one of these washers slide past the end, because you can tape it back up to get it on again, but once this starts fraying, there's kind of no going back, and if it's frayed too much, you're going to end up having to cut some off and make your poi shorter than you wanted and ruin the rope. Another thing to note about these poi is that the way we install the rope with the washer, we use a special tool so that we don't have to cut the ball open. So this ball is unmodified, really. We just punch the hole and punch this in, and there's no seam, there's no glue like you get with most contact poi. If you did want to replace this yourself, you would actually need to make a cut so that you could pull the rope through from the other side, putting the washer in this way and everything, and then glue it back shut with some vinyl glue, which is common practice with contact poi, but it's nice if you can keep the original factory finish there. So back to finishing the rope. I'm getting my washer in position here, and now I'm going to take off the tape, if I can find the end of it, and there we go. And you can see the braid is already totally fraying there, and you don't want that to travel down past where you're going to melt, which it almost is already. So pushing that washer up, it's really easy at this point to pop the washer off. Don't push it too far. If you pop that washer off, then you have to tape it again and get the washer over the tape, and it just barely fits. It's really hard, and there's a good chance that you'll end up ruining the rope. So do not push the washer too far. Just get it up there. You really don't need a whole lot because the rope is so dense. I've got, I'd say it's just a little more than the thickness of the washer actually. Maybe 1/8 of an inch there. So now, I recommend doing this in a well-ventilated area. I'm basically going to melt this into a puck that looks similar to what you saw at the other end there. And it takes a minute. This nylon, it's the good stuff. And it's pretty heat resistant. You can really, I find the side of the flame works better than just like, if you actually put the flame over it, it doesn't seem to get as hot. But if you keep the flame burning nicely, you can melt it on there. And if you have a torch lighter, it definitely works a little faster. It's possible to overheat it with that and kind of make it crispy and crunchy and charred. You definitely don't want to do that. Again, you want to use kind of the side of the flame. If you're using a torch lighter, just kind of blow the torch past it and use the edge of the flame to melt the end of your rope. And I'm just kind of going around wherever I see kind of a gap between the washer, and whenever I say a P, I blow out my flame. And the lighter is going to be very hot at this point, so be careful with it if you have to relight it like I just did. That definitely hurt a little bit. So there, that should be good. It doesn't take a whole lot. I mean, if you look at how much melt there was on here, it doesn't stick out that much past the washer, but it's so dense. I mean, I had put this in a vise and kneeled on the table and like wrapped it around my leg and literally tried to rip this through the washer, and I couldn't. So, you want to get definitely some, and part of that is really taking your time to heat it up so that melted plastic goes deep. So it's actually kind of a thick puck of plastic on the end here. It's not just a surface thin little skin of melted plastic. It's really melted in there. Then you're going to want to let that cool and harden for a bit. And it's probably cool enough now that it's not going to I can almost hold it. It's not going to melt my knob. So then push the knob back up. The knob has a little bit of spring, so you want to give it just like a little twist so it really seats down on top of the washers there. And then you're good to flow.